sea power is a basic ingredient of national strength. And mobility is a basic ingredient of sea power. Mobility means being able to go wherever needed on short notice. It also means being able to remain underway for extended periods without being dependent on fixed bases. All this is possible, of course, because the needed supplies can be delivered underway. Replenishment at sea gives the Navy maximum flexibility. In this film, you will see some of the basic elements of replenishment at sea, with emphasis on details of importance to officers on both delivering and receiving ships. If there's one thing that alone could be called the key to successful replenishment, it is advance planning. For the officer in tactical command and the underway replenishment group commander, planning for this operation was begun when the schedule was promulgated. This resulted in an op order for this replenishment. Now, with the replenishment scheduled to begin tomorrow morning, the OTC originates a message directing the order in which ships will go alongside. He will also prescribe the replenishment formation and a tentative course and speed, taking into account any recommendations he may have from the underway replenishment group commander. This is the most common formation, with replenishment ships in a line abreast, in one or more service lines. Destroyers screen the formation while waiting their turns alongside. The guide is normally the ship in this station. A few hours from now, the OTC will announce the course to be used for the operation. Weather permitting, the task group may maintain course toward the next replenishment rendezvous. More common is a course which puts the wind and sea about 10 degrees on the bow. If the wind and sea are not from the same direction and are moderate, the best course is into whichever one is dominant. In any weather, and particularly in heavy weather, a downwind course may be used. Within a few hours, the replenishment group will be joining up with the task group. Meanwhile, the supply ships are hard at work. A single day's operation may involve handling close to 1,000 tons of stores. Here, too, advanced planning is crucial. The location on deck for each item must be specified in advance, so the cargo will be properly arranged on the basis of the order of ships alongside, stations to be used, and so forth. Rendezvous between the two groups of ships often takes place at night. By now, the crew of each supply ship has already put in hundreds of man-hours. This picture by itself explains why last-minute changes cannot be made easily. Prior to use, all gear and rigging must be thoroughly inspected. For safety, it is mandatory that every piece of gear which is frayed, cracked, or damaged be replaced before the operation begins. Well in advance, the delivering ships were notified as to the rig capabilities of the receiving ships and what stations would be manned. In comparison, the receiving ship has few preparations to make, but the steps here are no less important. If possible, the ship's officers should have held a planning conference with their counterparts from the supply ships before leaving port. To ensure that all hands are thoroughly familiar with their jobs, training should have been given at every opportunity. The routes for striking down supplies must be laid out in advance. When breaking out the gear, it's a good idea to check the Replenishment at Sea publication. It contains a checkoff list of all the equipment that should be on hand. Checking the sound-powered phones in advance does not take long, and it can save a good deal of aggravation later. As far in advance as possible, the supply ship should be notified of any special requirements, such as the number of movies to be exchanged or the need for personnel transfer. If scheduled to replenish at a later time, the supply officer of the receiving ship should complete and submit the requisitions for the next replenishment. Ordering this far ahead ensures that the replenishment force has the time they need to process, order, schedule, and load for the next operation. Romeo at the dip on the delivering ship means she is steady on replenishment course and speed and is making preparations to receive the customer ship alongside. The receiving ship may take standby station before starting the approach. This station is 500 yards astern of the alongside position. For destroyers and smaller ships, the alongside distance should be from 60 to 100 feet. Greater distances are used for larger ships or for heavy weather operations. The receiving ship flies Romeo at the dip, meaning, I am ready to come alongside. On the delivery ship, Romeo close up indicates, I am ready to receive you alongside. On the receiving ship, Romeo close up, I am commencing my approach. For the approach and the entire time alongside, the most experienced men should be at the ship control stations. The delivery ship normally sends over the first line, except when the receiving ship is an aircraft carrier. A red helmet and jersey identifies the line-throwing gun crew. Both ships pass the warning. Stand by for the shot line. All hands take cover. Signals are exchanged between the two ships by whistle or bullhorn. All orders to the helm are given as course to steer in degrees, as steer 150. It may be necessary to carry some rudder because of the effects of hull wash. Hull wash is a result of the pressure changes that occur in the water around a moving ship. Pressure builds up ahead and astern, and a suction is created on each beam. As a result of this effect, a ship alongside tends to be drawn in. A position on bow or quarter can prove dangerous. Quick rudder action may be required by the smaller ship to counteract the hull wash in this position. The amount of rudder necessary to overcome the hull wash varies with the size of the two ships, distance between them, their speed, and sea conditions. This effect is increased in shallow water. The telephone and distance line must be kept taut by hand tending aboard the receiving ship so as to reflect actual distance between ships. A number of different types of rigs are available for transferring cargo at sea. In this film, we will discuss only a few. The high line is the most common rig for transferring small loads. It consists of an outhaul to the receiving ship, an inhaul or backhaul to the delivering ship, and the high line. The high line is used for small loads, such things as mail, movies, and personnel. However, for personnel transfer, the wire ropes must be replaced with manila, and winches may not be used. The housefall rig is used when the receiving ship does not have a winch available at the replenishment station. The inboard transfer whip is rove to a boom or king post, then to the heel block, and to a winch. The outboard transfer whip is rove first to a high point on the receiving ship, then over to the delivery ship, down to the heel block, and to another winch. Control is entirely in the hands of the delivery ship. The winches can be operated by a single man or by two men. the receiving ship need provide only an attachment point. The housefall rig handles loads up to 2,500 pounds. The Burton rig is preferred when the receiving ship has a winch available. One whip is rove to a high point on the delivery ship, to the heel block, and then to a winch. The other whip is rove to a high point on the receiving ship, to a fair lead or heel block, and then to the winch. It's important to note that whatever method is being used, the lines must always have a catenary, that is, a sag, as you see here. If winch operators permit the lines to become too taut, gear may be damaged or lines may part. The advantages of the Burton rig are better control and load capability up to 3,500 pounds. Modifications of this basic rig can be used for transferring loads up to 6 tons. Some Service Force ships now are equipped to use the constant tension highline method. Tension is maintained by a hydraulic ram or by a heavy counterweight housed inside a king post. Using this device, control of the highline is less critical. The constant tension method is especially suitable for handling heavy or delicate loads under adverse weather conditions. Another method that also requires special equipment is the fast automatic shuttle transfer system. It is intended primarily for transferring missiles, but cargo loads can be handled as well. Pneumatic equipment aboard the ammunition ship controls movement of the trolley. Shock absorbers slow the trolley without jarring the sensitive missile. With fast, a skilled crew can transfer missiles at the rate of 1 every 90 seconds. Regardless of the cargo transfer method used, the general procedures for the operation are the same. Whenever classified documents are to be transferred, the receiving ship is given word over the bridge-to-bridge circuit. The appropriate officer is then notified, so he will be standing by when the material arrives. Items such as narcotics and medicinal alcohol are handled the same way. The necessary receipt must be signed and returned promptly. Empty nets and pallets are sent back about every 5th net load. 15 minutes before completing the operation, the receiving ship hauls prep to the dip on the outboard side. When the last stores have been transferred and the rig is being disengaged, prep is closed up. Only small changes in course and speed are used while clearing the side. Let's consider refueling. 2 things must be completed before going alongside the oiler. The ship must be deballasted, and the existing fuel load must be balanced. A thorough knowledge of the effects of deballasting on the ship's stability is essential. Tanks having the most effect on stability should be emptied last and filled first. Balancing the fuel load means distributing the onboard fuel in the tanks so that about the same amount of fuel will be required for filling at each receiving station. Fleet oilers, in addition to their loads of black oil, avgas, and JP5, also carry a deck cargo of drummed lubricants and cylinder gas. Requests for any deck cargo should be made at least 1 hour prior to coming alongside. The most common means for refueling at sea is the span wire method. The hose is supported by a span wire rigged from the oiler to the receiving ship. 3 separate winches are used by the oiler to maintain control of span wire and fuel hose throughout the operation. A distance between ships of 60 to 140 feet should be maintained. Heavy weather rigs permit opening the distance further. On some destroyers and smaller ships, the end of the fuel hose is led into the fuel trunk and lashed in position. With this arrangement, when fueling is completed, the oiler blows air through the hose to clear out the excess oil, and then takes a back suction, so there will be no spillage when the hose is removed. This process takes about 3 minutes. The crew must understand that the fuel hose must not be removed until the blowdown and back suction have been completed. In unrigging, the hose is first slacked off, then hauled in by the oiler. It is important to note that the hose must be completely recovered before the span wire is released. On most larger ships and on some destroyers, a different method is used. A short piece of hose on the receiving ship is connected to a flange fueling connection. At the other end is a quick-release coupling called the rod coupling. With this type of fitting, no blowdown is necessary. In some refueling operations, the span wire rig cannot be used. This is normally the case when the receiving ship is smaller than a destroyer type, or when the delivering ship is other than a fleet oiler. For this, the close-in rig is employed. Since a span wire is not used, the hose cannot be run out very far, and the ships must remain close together. The close-in method is not suitable during heavy weather. Finally, there is the probe method of underway refueling. At the end of the hose is a special nozzle or probe. The probe remains closed until it is mated and locked in the receiving head. Using this method, time for rigging and unrigging is reduced to a minimum. Time alongside is little more than the time actually required for transferring the fuel. The usual methods for replenishment at sea require ships to operate at very close quarters. There is, however, one method for which this is not necessary. Vertical replenishment, using a helicopter to effect the transfers. On most ships, stores for vertical replenishment are broken out first. Later, there will not be room on deck for moving cargo aft. Maximum weight allowed on each load depends on such factors as type of helicopter, its fuel load, and weather conditions. Part of the necessary advance preparation is the development of a loading plan, which specifies the weight of each pallet and its position on the deck. And excessive load could cause loss of control of the helicopter. The helicopter platform on the delivery ship, as well as the drop area on each receiving ship, must be prepared for flight operations. Obstacles like the flagstaff must be removed. The area must be thoroughly policed to remove any loose items. A little thing like this could become a dangerous weapon if blown about by a helicopter airstream. On destroyers, aft gun mounts are trained athwartships and barrels depressed. Here's the proper uniform for all crew members who will be working in the drop area. Helmets strapped on, collars and sleeves buttoned, and all loose articles removed from clothing. Goggles are required for anyone who will be directly exposed to the helicopter airstream. For vertical replenishment, the formation should be on a course and speed that provides a relative wind of between 10 and 45 knots and between 10 and 45 degrees off the bow. However, a relative wind of up to 90 degrees off either bow is acceptable. As the helicopter approaches, it is guided by an officer or enlisted man assigned as landing signal officer. Operating close to a moving ship requires not only skill, but concentration on the part of the helicopter pilot. He cannot see the load he is trying to pick up. He divides his attention between the flight instruments and the LSO, with the helicopter crewman relaying signals to the pilot over the intercommunication circuit. For this reason, except in an emergency, The ship must not call on the Hilo Common Radio Circuit at this time. The pilot is given information such as the weight of the load, hull number of the receiving ship, and its range and relative bearing. The same information can also be relayed over the Hilo Common Radio Circuit once the helicopter is clear. Helicopter watching is a popular but dangerous sport. Your men must understand the importance of taking cover as the helicopter approaches. Whichever methods are used, there are two aspects of replenishment at sea that cannot be overemphasized. They are advanced planning and safety. For if planning is a key to success, safety might be called a bar to failure. The possibility of collision or of injury to crew members is always present. Every man involved, no matter what his job, must be made aware of the dangers. He must be well trained, and he must know precisely what to do in every possible emergency. In replenishment at sea, the aim is to transfer the maximum quantity safely in the minimum time. But remember that safety, not time, is always the controlling factor.